For decades, we literally treated the enterprise network exactly like a medieval castle, just assuming that if we built a thick enough wall, it would keep all the bad guys out. Well, welcome to this explainer, where we're going to go ahead and shatter that illusion. Today, we're exploring why the traditional firewall just isn't enough to protect modern enterprise networks anymore. For a long time, it was the gold standard of security, but as you'll see in just a bit, relying solely on that outer wall leaves a massive, glaring blind spot in a world where digital threats have gotten incredibly sophisticated.
So it begs a pretty fundamental question, right? Is the enterprise network actually safe with just a firewall? Now, a lot of people think perimeter defense is plenty. They assume, hey, if you lock the front door, the whole house is completely secure. But here's the thing. Today's most dangerous attacks, they don't even bother trying to break down the front door with brute force. Instead, they just sneak right in, perfectly disguised. And that is what is truly terrifying about modern cyber warfare. The attacker looks exactly like an everyday employee checking their email, downloading a report, or just browsing the web. They're hiding in plain sight.
Let's dive right into Section 1, Why Firewalls Fall Short.
To really understand modern defense, we first have to understand the fundamental blind spot of the traditional firewall. It's not that firewalls are fundamentally flawed, not at all. It's simply that they have a very specific, limited job description. Basically, a firewall acts kind of like a simple city gate, or maybe a bouncer at a club just checking IDs. It happily permits TCP 443 because, well, that's just the standard highway for secure web traffic. But what if an attack uses that exact same allowed channel? If the ID says web traffic, the firewall lets it right through. It never actually opens the briefcase to see if there's a web shell, which is basically a remote control backdoor, or some sneaky database manipulation trick like an SQL injection hiding inside. To the firewall, an encrypted, malicious payload looks identically harmless to legal web browsing. It checks your ticket, but it never ever inspects your luggage.
Moving right along to Section 2, the role of IDS and IPS. Because the firewall only checks that ID at the door, the cybersecurity world realized pretty quickly that we desperately needed a second layer of defense, one that actually opens up and looks inside the briefcases passing through our networks. So first up, we have the Intrusion Detection System, or IDS. Think of the IDS as your network's high-tech security camera. It is a completely passive monitoring system. It just sits there quietly analyzing packets, detecting anomalies, logging threats, and triggering alerts for your security operations center. It's absolutely essential for threat monitoring and forensics, so you know exactly how a breach happened after the fact. But crucially, it won't actively step in to tackle the intruder. It logs the crime, sure, but it doesn't stop the criminal. In contrast, we have the Intrusion Prevention System, or IPS. Now, this is a much more aggressive, hands-on approach. Instead of a passive camera on the wall, the IPS is your active, armed guard standing right smack in the middle of the network traffic flow. It doesn't just watch, it acts. The absolute instant it spots malicious activity, it steps in. It's fully equipped to drop dangerous packets into the void, immediately sever a compromised connection, and ban the offending IP address altogether. It interrupts an ongoing attack in real time, right before the payload can even execute.
Okay, so how do these systems actually see the threat? Well, they use a process called deep packet inspection, and it works in steps. First, it intercepts the packet data flowing through the network. Then it performs a really deep, granular inspection. But remember, attackers are incredibly sneaky. They rarely send malware in one obvious, easily readable file. Instead, they slice their malicious commands into tiny, fragmented pieces scattered across hundreds of different packets. Step 3 is where the absolute magic happens. The system catches those fragmented pieces and reassembles scattered TCP sessions, kind of like putting together pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle. Only after that puzzle is built, in Step 4, does it reveal the complete hidden attack command.
So, the crucial point here is that deep packet inspection goes far, far beyond looking at basic IP addresses and port numbers. It's analyzing the digital fingerprints of the browser, what we call TLS fingerprints. It's actively checking the DNS queries your computer makes to translate website names, and it's tearing apart the raw payload content looking for specific shellcode features. It's analyzing the HTTP headers and the user agent. In simple terms, the system isn't just looking at the return address on the outside of the envelope, it is systematically tearing open the envelope, pulling out the letter, and reading the actual contents line by line.
Let's look at how it spots the bad stuff in Section 3, Signatures and Behavior Detection.
Okay, so once those packets are opened and the puzzle pieces are all reassembled, the system needs a reliable methodology to recognize what malicious activity actually looks like. I mean, how does it know a specific string of code is a weapon? The core technology for most IDS and IPS is signature detection. Much like the antivirus software on your personal laptop, it relies on feature matching.
It compares network traffic against massive, constantly updated databases of known attack patterns. If it sees a classic database manipulation trick, like the code string or 1 equals 1, or a payload trying to improperly access system directories, the signature matches. It's exactly like recognizing a thief because they got caught carrying a known confiscated lockpick.
But wait, what if an attack is entirely new? What if it's a zero-day exploit that has absolutely no known signature in any database? Well, that's where the system dynamically shifts to behavior detection. It utilizes AI to analyze the normal, everyday flow of your network and flags any suspicious deviations. Just imagine an employee's laptop. Usually it just accesses email and a few web portals, right? But if that specific laptop suddenly tries to scan 1,000 internal servers at 3 a.m., the AI recognizes that behavior as a massive red flag. Even if the code itself is brand new and completely unrecognizable, the behavior is undeniably malicious and the system shuts it down.
Now things get tricky in Section 4, the HTTPS encryption blind spot.
Just as defenders got smarter with deep inspection and behavior analysis, attackers adapted. They found a way to wrap their attacks in a cloak of digital invisibility. And that brings us to the HTTPS problem. Today, almost all modern internet traffic is heavily encrypted. And while this is fantastic for our personal privacy, keeping our credit cards and passwords safe, it is a massive headache for an IPS. Because the traffic is encrypted into ciphertext, meaning scrambled, completely unreadable data, the IPS can only see the outer layer, the IP, the port, and the initial connection handshake. The actual payload, where the malware lives, it's completely hidden. Inspecting it is literally like a TSA agent trying to X-ray a solid steel safe. The IPS is just entirely blind.
So, to solve this massive encryption blind spot, enterprises use SSL inspection. Essentially, the enterprise firewall acts as a highly secure middleman. When a client sends encrypted traffic, the firewall actually intercepts and decrypts the payload first. Then, the IPS can step in, read the clear text, and hunt for threats. If the traffic is clean, the firewall re-encrypts the data and sends it safely out to the internet. It's an incredibly effective process for sure, but it takes massive computing power. Plus, it brings up huge privacy debates. After all, this means the company could technically be decrypting and inspecting an employee's personal banking or medical traffic while they're connected to the corporate network.
This leads us right into Section 5, how attackers still bypass.
Now, you might look at SSL inspection, behavior analysis, and deep packet inspection and think, wow, this airtight setup solves absolutely everything. But attackers are incredibly resourceful, and this arms race, it never ever stops. Hackers use modern evasion techniques to slip right by. They might further encrypt their specific payload or intentionally scramble their packets. But perhaps the most devious method is what we call living off the land attacks. Instead of bringing their own obvious malware, attackers use legitimate administrative tools that are already installed on your computer, like PowerShell, Python, or SSH. It's the digital equivalent of a burglar walking into an office building, putting on a janitor's uniform, and just using the building's own master keys. To the security system, everything looks like perfectly normal system maintenance.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, the modern multi-layer defense. This constant game of cat and mouse proves one critical reality. Simply installing an IPS, even a highly advanced one, does not make an enterprise invincible. True enterprise security is a team sport. It requires a multi-layered architecture where specialized tools constantly collaborate, mainly because each device sees the battlefield from an entirely different perspective. Your firewall watches the borders and guards the gates. Your IDS and IPS inspect the actual cargo moving through. Your EDR watches the behavior of individual laptops and servers. Your SIEM acts as the central brain, correlating security events across the whole network, while an AI-driven SOC automates the rapid response. It's a web. If one layer misses the threat, the next layer is right there to catch it.
Ultimately, there's a fantastic shift in how we view this technology today. IDS and IPS are no longer just advanced firewalls. They are the active security radar inside the enterprise network. The whole era of trust but verify is basically dead. We are now in the era of continuous assumed breach surveillance. These advanced systems aren't just about controlling who enters the building anymore. They are about vigilantly watching exactly what someone does after they inevitably get inside your network. But all of this leaves us with a really fascinating question. If we have AI analyzing erratic behavior, advanced firewalls decrypting web traffic in real time, and armed digital guards inspecting every single reassembled packet, exactly how did the world's most elite hackers still manage to break in every single day? Seriously, think about the blind spots we haven't even covered yet. How would you evade an incredibly sophisticated internal radar? Keep that thought in mind and join us in our next explainer as we step directly into the mind of the attacker to dissect the brilliant and devious tactics they use to sneak right past these very defenses. Thanks for exploring this with me today.